Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whatever the I Want podcast, where I, your host, Gabby, get to talk about whatever the I want. And today's episode is a more serious one. It is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, but I haven't necessarily prioritized it, and a couple things have triggered it in my life. And so now I just feel like I guess it's time to share. So I dated somebody with a porn addiction, and it was not something that I was fully made aware of until we had probably been in the relationship for well over 6 months to potentially a year. I, in my relationships, have made it very clear that ignore me petting my parents' cat, but I've made it very clear in relationships that porn just isn't something that I agree with. It's not something that I interact with. It's just not something that is for me. And, in other relationships, partners and I have agreed on that. That's just not something that we think benefits our relationship. So I'm not sure whether it's where exactly it all stemmed from. I'm sure some of it was growing up Catholic, but it's just never been something that I've actively looked for. And so I made it clear in this relationship that this is what a boundary is for me, and this is what I expect from my partner. And so, I make it very well known early on that this is what I'm expecting, and I hope that you can agree with this, or that we somehow find a middle ground. So I had heard a couple red flags throughout the relationship, especially very early on. On our first date, after they picked me up and we're about to head into the restaurant, they just immediately kissed me and they're like, "Oh, I just wanted to get that over with." And I was like, "Okay." And then it wasn't until we had eventually been intimate together, they were like, "You're exactly how I pictured you to be." And I was like, "That's kind of weird." I don't really know this person. What are you doing picturing me? I don't know. It just felt very off-putting. And I don't remember when I first started seeing that they were just crossing so many boundaries, and that I was realizing they actually had a problem. I don't know when it all started, but eventually, I started feeling really insecure. I just started feeling like this is not something that is benefiting our relationship. It's causing arguments. It's something that they clearly struggle with, but I didn't understand that they struggled with this problem. I just thought I don't know what's happening. And I was also young, so it's I think I also at that point had different insecurities, and so it just kind of felt like that was only exasperating them. And at that point, if you just have different points of views on these things and different points on what's a boundary for you, if somebody can't respect that, I feel like that's just, it's such a big part of a relationship that it's just end it. Just don't even continue on with it. That's why dating later on, those are things that I talked about early on, because it's if we need to be on the same page about these really big things. So I remember at one point, I won't do these things now, but I had read one of their journals, which I'm not condoning this at all. I'm not saying you should snoop or do anything, but something told me to look inside their journal. So I do, and I end up seeing that they wrote in there that they were being intimate with me and imagining it to be one of my friends. And I was like, that is so fucked up. So fucked up. And thankfully it's not a friend of mine who I'm super close to. It's just an acquaintance of mine, but it still was but it was somebody who I looked up to. And so it was just kind of okay. And then I started resenting this person, even though, my friend didn't do anything. It was him that did it, And then so, that was such a tough time for me. I this person that I dated openly admitted to me that anytime they see a woman, they immediately picture them naked. And I was like, what? That's weird. That's really weird. And so I eventually, I started thinking, like, it really, really started like processing in my mind. I'm like, every woman? I'm like, you have a mom, you have sisters, I have nieces. It really started making me question, like, well, how far is there a boundary? Is there a line to this? And it was really, really like, I don't know what's happening. And it was one of those relationships. I mean, it was toxic. Um, Not always, but it definitely just reached points where it was just like, this is not serving me. Um, but I was just like, where's the line? Like, where is the actual line? And then one time he admitted to me, he was like, have you ever considered plastic surgery? And that was where I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Have I ever considered plastic surgery? He's like, yeah, sometimes I just picture you, to look like this and whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I already had spent some of my life so insecure about my body that now to be dating somebody who is telling me what to do with my body just felt so hurtful and so, I don't know, like, demeaning, and it made me feel just so confused, like, and I think a lot of this stems from, like, the first, like, boy that I dated in middle school was, like, my first perception of what a boyfriend was. He was a piece of shit. Like, he told me that I should unalive myself. He told me that I was, like, a bitch. He, like, was an asshole to me. And so then I think I didn't really realize that, like, that's where my first perception of, like, how I should be treated by men started. And so, I mean, my dad is a great dad. I know that it didn't start from him. He's always, like, taking care of us. He's always, um, he's just a really good guy. And my dad nowadays, he tells us he loves us. He's affectionate. Those things. But, like, I know that it didn't stem from my dad. I know that it stemmed from this horrible person. So it's so crazy because I had gone through phases of dating people who were entirely different, but you kind of find yourself coming back to somebody who, like, belittles you. And for somebody to belittle you in that way is just so, like, think about it. I'm not going to give out, I guess, too much of my age because I know that people could, like, figure out who it is depending on the time frame. But like, I'm in my early 20s. I'm young, and so I'm figuring out my life, and it's like I don't have a sense of who I am, and yet I'm allowing for this person to, like, dictate who I am and my value and my worth based off of my body. And I had noticed at some point that they would get out of bed in the middle of the night, and they'd be like, oh, like, and I'm a light sleeper, so I notice these things, like, if somebody gets up in the middle of the night. And so they would get up, and I'm like, oh, like, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, my stomach just hurts. And they would be in the bathroom for, like, hours. And I would, like, go knock on the door, like, hey, are you okay? Like, you need anything? You need, like, are you fine? Like, you need, I don't know, like, medicine or something? Like, no, I'm good. And I'm just like, okay. And, like, I didn't think anything of it. But later on, after we had broken up, they had just, like, word vomited everything to me. And I was like, was I just that naive and that, like, hopeful that this person who had clearly shown me that they did not respect me or my boundaries or just me as a person or valued our relationship, like, did I just, like, allowed for all of that to be bypassed? Like how they say love blinds. They ended up admitting to me, like, oh, every time I went to the bathroom, I was actually watching porn and doing XYZ. And I was like, and then after all that, they were like, oh, I feel so much better. They just, like, laid so much on me. And I was so torn because, breakups are already tough. We had already broken up. And towards the end of our breakup, it was so uncomfortable because I don't even know how to describe it. So at some point we were living together, and towards the end of our relationship, they just like stopped talking to me. And I was like, "Okay, like what's happening here?" And then I, told them, I'm like, "Okay, well, what, like, you need to explain to me what is happening in your head, what is going on." And they, I'm like, "I'm not going to be in this if you're not going to talk to me. Like, I'm not going to go days without talking to you. Like, that's so dumb. And you're not even telling me like what you need from me, or like you're not explaining things, you're not communicating whatsoever." So, I'm like, "I think this isn't going to work out." And they're like, "Oh, thank God you said it. Thank God." They're like, I couldn't do this. I couldn't do this anymore." I think that throughout the relationship, they just lived with a lot of guilt from doing what they were doing. And I think that that's truthfully what a lot of it was just that they knew that they had a problem, and they just felt so guilty every single time they would relapse, or just like, I mean, I didn't know that this problem existed, but I mean, come to find out, that problem started whenever they were like, I think even as early as 9 years old. And, their parents weren't the most present in their lives. So, I mean, what does a kid turn to at that age? You turn to social media, you turn to your friends, and whatever access you have to the internet. Because, whenever we were growing up, we didn't really have access to too much. But I mean, you could get access to things if you really tried. And so I think they also were struggling with their sexuality and things like that. And so I think a lot of that was just like projected onto me, and based off of like their addiction. It just was like, "Gabby, you're the problem. You're making me feel this way. You're the reason why I'm like this." And at some point they started going to therapy. And so I was like, "Okay, cool, like good. I'm glad you're going to therapy." And so one day their therapist invited me to go to a session, and I had maybe gone to like 2 or 3. I don't think I really went to many. And the therapist is talking to me about these things, and I'm like she was like telling me lies, and I'm like, "Where did you hear this information from?" And she's like, "Well, your partner told me that." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's a lie." And then they're looking at me. We're all three like Spider-Manning, like finger pointing at each other. "Well, you said this and you said that." And like, well, they basically saw that everything that my partner said was the truth, and that I was the bad guy. And I also was unaware at the time that like you shouldn't go to those things. Like, if you're going to go, I don't think it was necessarily couples therapy, but like in a way it kind of was. And so your couples therapist should not be either partner's main therapist. But of course, I'm young, I don't know any better. I'm so lost in this entire situation. I just want this person to get help, because clearly they have a problem if they're telling me that I should change things about my body. They're the ones crying, abusing drugs, abusing alcohol. I had seen them like pour liquor down the sink. "Oh, I'm gonna quit." Throw weed in the trash, flush it down the toilet. "I'm gonna quit." So I saw that they just like really, really just struggled with addiction. And I think a big part of that was just that they hadn't healed at all. So like what was happening was just a lot of masking who you are. And I remember, they'd obviously opened up to me about their sexuality. And so I suggested like, "Oh, why don't you, come out to the people around you? Why don't you come out to some family? Why don't you come out to, a friend or something?" And it was just like, I was always met with resistance, met with like, "No, Gabby, that doesn't happen for people like me," or like, "My dad will disown me," or "My mom is going to do this," or whatever. And so there's so many more deep layers to this story. But essentially I was being gaslit in therapy, and I'm like, "I did not say that, and like this situation did not happen this way. Like, I'm just so confused." And then I really started to question myself, like, am I the problem? I do think that there's room for things in certain relationships. Like, if you and your partner don't care about, like a threesome, or like opening up the relationship, if you don't care about that stuff, then like it doesn't matter if it's coming from both sides. You know what I mean? Like, if you can both agree on something, I think that whatever works for your relationship works for your relationship. But it was always like, and then it started getting like strange to the point where it was like, okay, like, do we open up the relationship? Like, I was like, somewhat open to the idea. I think for me, to, and in that relationship, like I was willing to open it up because it just kind of felt like neither of our needs were being met. And I was willing to open it up, but it got to a point where it was like, how about Gabby, you date other people and you be intimate with them, because my needs were also not being met intimately. You you go be with them, but like maybe I could watch sometimes. And it's like, what? Like I'm so confused. I'm so lost. I'm so like what are you talking about? Like it just felt like it was just like the relationship was just like chaos. Like just picture like a scribbly line like just drawn like in darkness all over the paper. Like that's it just felt like I just felt so lost, so confused, so I didn't know who I was anymore. Like I'm like, what even is this? Like, this isn't a relationship. If we're talking about like, okay, we're gonna open it up, and you can do this, and you can do that. Okay, but like I didn't say that, and it was just like things were just like all over the place. And so we had tried coming to a compromise of, you know, our way of like opening up the relationship, and then they started crossing lines, and I'm like, that's not what we agreed upon. We agreed upon like these set of rules, and like this is what we're okay with. And now you're just like running around laps in the list that we wrote together. And so I just felt so depressed. And it's so crazy because like that's a point in my life where I felt like outwardly things seemed great. Like aside from like this person like would have been great as a friend, should have just stayed as my friend versus like dating them. And so I think that do not force relationships, do not force things. If you have boundaries, if you have things that you aren't okay with when it comes to like, I know some people it's down to like the nitty gritty. It's like who you follow, it's like liking somebody's pictures, commenting on them. I know that there's so many layers to all of this. Um, But I also think like it's important to know what you're okay with and what you're not okay with in a relationship. Is your marriage monogamous? Are y'all polyamorous? Do you need to meet the person? I've known people who are in poly relationships where they're like, I don't want to know anything. As long as you come home to me at night, I don't want to know anything. And to other people, it's like, no, I want to meet them. I want to know, you know, a little bit about them. You know, if they're coming to the house, you know, maybe your rule is that nobody comes to this house. This house is our space. You know, like there's so many layers to all of this. But I think it's just so important to know at the end of the day that you do not need to lower your standards for somebody who, for anybody. You don't need to lower your standards for anybody. You are going to find people, because I remember at one point they were like gaslighting the shit out of me, like, well, Gabby, good luck finding somebody who feels this way or whatever. And it's like, I have been in plenty of relationships where people have completely respected my boundaries. And even it's been some of the men telling me, I don't like that stuff. I don't want to do that stuff. I don't like that stuff. I don't feel like that's conducive to our relationship. And so it's like, there's this huge stereotype that it's like women who don't like these things, but there's a lot of men who don't like those things either. There's also men who have strict boundaries, you know, like I don't want for you to be, you know, getting a drink from a guy at the bar. And it's like, it is totally okay for either party or all parties to have boundaries, and they should just be respected. And I think early on in a relationship, if you can figure out what they're okay with, what they're not okay with, and properly communicate that, like you're always going to find success if you communicate properly. We all know that communication is the most important part of a relationship. And it's like I entirely agree. I remember whenever I was dating, like when I put myself back on the market, I was like, okay, like on dates, are you okay with moving to Florida? Are you okay with have not having kids? I mean, I don't know. Like those are things that I was like genuinely thinking about. Like, do you want to be married? Do you not want to be married? Are you religious? Like, you should be talking about those things. And I remember somebody telling me like on a first date you're talking about that stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I'm basically interviewing who I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. And it's like, I'm not going to just jump into dating somebody that I don't feel like I know or have a grasp of. And I know that early on some people can, lie or beat around the bush, but I'm not the type to do that, because it's like, or maybe if they ask me a question, like, oh, Gabby, are you poly? I might be like, I'm not, but I'm open to it, which in this situation I'm not. But like, I think that it's also important to communicate like that there are some things that you are willing to compromise on, like, do women take care of the entire household? In some relationships, it's the woman who does the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning, and in other relationships, it's a 50-50. And in some relationships, there's the woman who provides entirely financially, and then there's others where the man provides entirely financially, or they both go 50-50. Like, there's no right or wrong way to go about any relationship or anything in your life when it comes to having a partner. The key to it is just communicating, this is what I'm okay with, this is what I'm not okay with. And I also think it's so, so, so important before you look for a relationship to figure out what your boundaries are, and to understand that if you have a problem, if you have addictions, you need to go to therapy, resolve those things, learn to love yourself first, strip down those layers of who you are and figure out why you are this way before you bring somebody else into it, because that person was not ready for a relationship. And looking back, I was not ready for a relationship either, but it's like there was just so much like, this is how it's supposed to be and this is how it's supposed to be, and we can't meet in the middle, but we're trying to make it work. And it's like, if you can't meet in the middle, it's not going to work, especially over like having kids, marriage, boundaries, like really, really big things that are boundaries. I remember when I started dating somebody, another person, they're like, oh, they were talking about, really wanting kids. And I'm like, if you want kids right now, I can't give that to you. I'm not planning to have kids in the next year or 2 years. But if you feel like that's where your alignment is right now, that's at the phase of life that you're in right now, you go for it. I'm perfectly fine with walking away from this and understanding that it just didn't work out. We're on different timelines. We have different schedules. We're just not, compatible in this way. And so that's okay. And so, obviously I wish this person all the best. I wish them, all of the healing and all of the love in the world. And that's all that you can do in a lot of breakups. I mean, can you be friends with your ex? That I don't know. I have yet to actually do that. I've been like acquaintances with exes, but never necessarily friends. And so I think that all that you can do ultimately is just wish people the best. It's like, so things just don't work out, and that's okay. And ultimately, it's just going to lead you to whatever is next. And obviously, it's hard to leave relationships like that where you feel like your boundaries aren't being respected. It is hard because you think like, well, I love them, but like, not that love and marriage are different, but they kind of are. Love is a feeling and marriage is a commitment. And so, whenever you marry somebody, you kind of combine both. I know people who have been married, whose parents have been married, and it was like, okay, well, you're successful, I'm successful, we have a good head on our shoulders, we both make a great amount of money, and we have the same vision for what we want in our life. And so it's more of like an agreement of like, okay, we're going to make this a partnership. And there's other people who, have that like, oh, we fall in love, and oh, it's, I have all these butterflies and these feelings, and then it eventually leads to marriage. But I mean, love and marriage are entirely different things. And I think that if you're in a relationship looking to eventually get married, you need to have these conversations. If you're just dating for funsies and you don't care about any of that, then don't care about that. Just have fun, go about your life, just make sure you're getting tested. And I think that if you are looking for a marriage, have these conversations as early as you can and be willing to walk away. There's so many people in the world. I know that we convince ourselves that like, I will never find love again. Nobody will ever love me. And and it's because you yourself think that you are unlovable. Like, you might not think that, but like, I'm telling you right now that if you are thinking like, it's too late for me, this won't ever happen, like, it's been too long, I haven't been in the game for so long, whatever, like, that's just you being in your head and you convincing yourself of these things. This rooster's going crazy. That's you convincing yourself of these things because you yourself do not feel inherently worthy of that. But if you are somebody who's confident, like Taylor Swift has gone periods of her life being single, and it's like, And people, no matter all the shit that they say about her dating this person and dating that person, she's always dating somebody and blah, 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 blah. Like, why won't she ever settle down? And she doesn't give a fuck. Because why should she? She's figuring out her life. Okay, that's who I thought was the person for me at 17 years old. Okay, that's who I thought was for me at 25. And it's like, it's okay to be dating and to be learning about yourself. But like, I'd much rather, I was telling my nieces, because they're like, oh, are you going to get married anytime soon? I'm like, I would much, much, much rather have y'all meet 15 boyfriends of mine, and you can judge me about like, oh, she's had so many boyfriends or whatever, versus me sitting there and getting a divorce every couple years because I'm not certain of things. Like, whenever I get married, I want to be certain that this is what I want. And obviously, I know that it's going to be like, I'm certain of what I want right now, because you don't know who you're going to be or who they're going to be in 20 years from now, 40, 50 years from now. You don't know what life has in store for you. I know that those are all decisions that you make in that moment based off of the information that you have at that time. So obviously, I know that there's room for that, but I'm like, I want to be sure. I want to be 100% positive that like, this is the person that I want to be moving forward with, because who you marry is a huge part of who you are in life. It dictates your whole future. It dictates so much. It dictates, are you going to have kids? Where are you going to live? What does your life look like? And your partner is your half throughout that. And so I have no issue with dating a person here for a couple years, dating a person here for a couple years, and then figuring out like, oh, maybe I am ready to get married now, or like, maybe this is the person. And and like, oh, and I know that I guess like, the older I get, the more certain of myself that I am, and the more confident I am in my decisions. So I do feel like that point in time is going to happen eventually. Like, I definitely see myself like in the next 10 years being married, probably even within the next 5. But it's like, I am not at that point currently where I'm like, I'm ready, like, I'm ready to get married. Like, my sister was like, oh, if your partner were to get on a knee and be like, hey, do you want to get married? What would you say? And I'm like, at this point in time, at this given moment, I would say no. And I don't think that there's any harm in that. And obviously, you have to have those conversations. If you say no to a proposal, is the relationship over? Is it not over? And so, like, I've had this conversation with my partner. Like, if you were to propose and I were to say no, the relationship is not over. That's just a conversation that we need to have of what do we need to do to get to the point where we want to get married. And so it's like, conversations, communication is everything. So if anything in this episode resonated with you, please share in the comments below, because I know that I'm not the only person out there who has dated somebody with an addiction of all sorts, because their porn addiction showed up in so many other ways. And I don't know where it all started. I haven't spoken to this person in I don't know how many years at this point. But yeah, like, just know that if you are currently in a situation like this, it is not your fault. I used to blame myself a lot, like, oh, well, maybe if I was prettier, if I had this type of body, or like, maybe they would want me more. And it was just like, no, none of that is fucking true. This is a problem that they have, that they're dealing with, and it has nothing to do with who you are and what your value is as a person. And those are things that I had to learn. I had to experience that to get to where I am now. And I think that it was tough. I mean, it was really, really tough. I felt very insecure, very lost, very down. I was very like self-deprecating, especially when you have somebody telling in your ear, like, you should look this way, you should do this, whatever. Then you start to believe those things. And they were a very negative person to be around. So I'm, obviously happy that I'm out of that situation. But keep in mind that, like, you should be around people who make you feel good, who make you feel confident, and who make you feel loved and sexy and beautiful or confident. And to anybody who doesn't make you feel that way, you got to cut those people out of your life. And at some point you will, because you know that you have to, because or else, like, then you're going to, keep repeating the cycle. So obviously easier said than done, but I'm living proof that it can happen and you come out stronger at the other end. And yeah, I just want to thank you all so much for allowing this podcast to be my way of just sharing my life and my life experiences that have ultimately made me who I am. And obviously, I wouldn't change any of those experiences because, I mean, it's just the way life played out. You can't, and it's not for me to sit and wonder about the past and to be crying over it. You know, it's obviously something that I've healed, a wound that I've healed, and I'm very happy and grateful that I have, and that I can sit here and say that I love myself as I am. I love my body as it is, and I know that I'm not perfect, but I know that it doesn't matter because I love myself through all my flaws and my imperfections. So, yay! Let today be the day that you start loving yourself and you know, start going about your healing journey with everything. So, with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.